Police continue to search for two teenage girls who went missing early yesterday.
It's been nearly 24 hours, of course, since they were reported missing.
Police, sheriffs, firefighters, and the Department of Natural Resources are all involved in the search for those teenagers right now.
I was pleasantly surprised at the quality of this documentary, the filmmaking, the research, the interviews, the footage. Having been to Delphi myself, I appreciated that the documentary went there at the right time of the year, in winter, when this crime happened, when the trees are leafless, when the whole area is a sort of tan color. I felt episode 1 did an excellent job at not only reintroducing us to both Abby and Libby, Libby via her own story and family, and Abby via her own story and family. Not the two of them being introduced sort of at the same time. Not the two of them as merely a tagline to a crime. They were fleshed out thoughtfully and sensitively as fully fledged individuals in their own right, as well as the community of Delphi as a sort of individual in its own right. In this analysis, I want to deal with 5 disturbing insights from episode 1.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime.
We have found 2 bodies in Deer Creek, about a mile east of town. We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play.
Now, you can see in that footage how the bridge has been altered, how it's been updated, it's been upgraded, it's been made safer, and there's also a barrier there that prevents you from going any further. That is how I found the bridge when I was there. Anyway, let's now deal with 5 disturbing insights from episode 1. Number 1, absent fathers. It's amazing that Libby told her grandma, not her mother or father, that she'd be okay. That's how absent her parents were at the time. It's very clear from the documentary that what made Abby and Libby vulnerable, both in a real physical sense, but also importantly in a psychological sense, was the absence of their fathers, this protracted absence of their biological fathers in their personal lives. In fact, neither of their biological fathers appear in the documentary. So you have this idea that both the fathers of these young girls aren't in the picture, and then something horrible happens to them as a result of some other man. And how often does that actually happen in real life, just in a general sense? You know, it makes one wonder whether Richard Allen actually knew Libby's father was out of the picture. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, but one also gets a sense of young girls needing boys in their life, perhaps more than usual, more than other girls of their age. Why? Because of the absence of a strong father figure. Now, if I followed episode 1 properly, I did make notes. One of the notes is that Libby's parents were both incarcerated. Is that right? Or is it one parent from the one victim and one parent from the other? Or is it both parents of one of the victims? Either way, this is a present example of how crime infects broken societies. Because broken societies start with broken homes. And someone committing a crime who's then taken away from the home and they're incarcerated, that makes the society that remains there broken. You know, there's a tear in the fabric of society. And then crime preys on that as well. You know, it's also clear that drug addiction is a sort of unspoken malaise drifting around Delphi, affecting youngsters who feel, I guess, trapped in the middle of nowhere and perhaps with no prospects of escaping. When I went to Indiana, I found it a lovely sort of area. It reminded me of the area where I grew up in, but, you know, it's certainly nice to pass through. I'm not sure if it would be very nice to grow up there.
What kind of evil person would want to commit a crime like this?
Are there any either suspects or persons of interest being questioned at this time?
We have not gotten that far into the investigation. We were asking for anyone to come forward. We might have seen somebody out there on Monday especially if they were near the Monon High Bridge.
That feeling of being trapped at home, which I think all teenagers feel at some point, is why Abby and Libby took the risk they did. They wanted to take a risk and seize the day and have a little adventure. And bear in mind, this risk that they took was right around the time of Valentine's Day. So it's really taking a risk in that romantic sense. And how many of us haven't done the same thing when we were teenagers?
It is a case that is in the national spotlight, and there are no answers in sight, and that has many people on edge.
We're checking the cell phones, we're checking their social media. We're looking at every possible option.
Can you tell us the cause, the manner of death?
No, we cannot do that at this time.
Number 2, called off the search early. I must say this part really upset me. It's really just, in a way, incomprehensible. What else was there to do than search? It's not one person missing, 2 people missing, and you know where they were. It's not a really big area to search either. Not an easy area to search, but certainly not that difficult to do. And so by calling off the search early, what happened?
We just lost the initiative.
Can you say whether they were killed at the spot they were found or at a different location?
We're not, at this point in time, I don't even want to mention that either.
We now know that they were killed at a different spot, and then the bodies dragged away from the river to another spot, not that far away, but that in itself is quite interesting. It's easy to say in hindsight because I'm sure no one expected the crime to be as serious as it was, just as those in Moscow didn't expect a quadruple murder either in the middle of their home or in the middle of their campus. But the precious hours that went by possibly allowed evidence that could have been recovered to be blown away or to be destroyed by the sun.
See, this is the path that we go down. There's no path going there, so we have to go down here. Hi.
Number 3, the bridge is dangerous to walk on. The initial search focused on the area directly below the bridge. This makes sense because the obvious assumption to make is that the girls fell through a weak wooden strut. Those struts are old and creaky and have fairly big gaps in between. It really is quite a scary bridge to walk on. It's very high up and it kind of feels rickety, feels very exposed. Had a team of searchers spent 20 minutes radiating outwards from the far side of the bridge, they could have spotted the victims that same night. And who knows, that could have changed the trajectory of the whole investigation. If you had cops literally going out that night, looking for the people that were there, who were out there that night, knocking on doors. Number 4, crime scene. How the girls were found is that Abby's clothing was found in the water. So it started with finding clothing in water, then going up the bank from there and finding signs of disturbance in the ground, and then from there actually finding the bodies. And that confirms what I've been saying all along, that Richard Allen likely used the water to wash away evidence. Virtually no DNA evidence was found in the West Memphis 3 case as well. I've written a book about that case, King of Freaks, and we know Jodi Arias also washed evidence of herself off Travis by placing him in the shower. So we know that water can be quite an effective way of doing this. Same with Lacey Peterson. Richard Allen redressing one of the victims in the wrong clothing also shows an attempt to cover up or minimize the sexual nature of the crime. We saw this in the JonBenet Ramsey case, a sexual crime and then the victim dressed and wrapped in a blanket. Also in the Amanda Knox case where the victim was covered with a comforter. In that case you have a brutal attack with not just one knife but more than one knife, and then the victim covered up with a blanket. That is a mismatch to the brutality. Do you think you had that sort of situation in the Idaho 4 case? I don't. Now, there may be no evidence of a sexual crime in the Delphi case, but that doesn't mean that wasn't a driving force. Incidentally, placing branches over the bodies was another way of covering up the crime scene. The fact that some people literally believed putting branches on dead bodies was a sign of Odinism is one of the most ridiculous aspects of this case. And quite a few YouTubers entertained that, spoke about that. It shows you how many people out there will believe anything, and the crazier the better, particularly if it makes a crime scene more evil and ominous and part of some deep state conspiracy. You can see the killer spent a significant amount of time at the crime scene covering it up, which is a sign of him feeling ashamed of what he had done and understanding the taboo nature of his acts. Also interesting, although he had a gun with him, he didn't use it. Why? Because he was trying to keep what he was doing quiet. It's actually a very interesting thing when you go to that area. You can imagine that something like a gunshot would be easily audible from someone standing on the bridge. It would really alert people. And that would have alerted them to where the crime had happened as well. It would lead to a targeted search. And the taboo nature of this act ought to have been assigned to the cops that this was highly likely a local from a conservative town, so quite a conservative person in a sense, someone who turned out to be, as we know, a married father. I mean, in 2017, Richard Allen was 45 years old. He was old enough to be the victim's father. Incidentally, over the weekend, I watched another surprisingly excellent documentary on Netflix on Pamela Anderson. She speaks frankly about her childhood and describes a 25-year-old boy offering to give her a massage when she was just 12 years old and then raping her. Well, Richard Allen was almost twice the age of Pamela Anderson's perpetrator. It's also interesting that Richard Allen redressed just one of the victims, Abby, but not Libby, which suggests that he may have abandoned the crime scene prematurely.
Libby and Abby need you.
We believe this person is our suspect.
Someone knows who this individual is. Is it a family member? Is it a neighbor? Is it an acquaintance?
That's a clip from just before 32 minutes from the documentary. Now, I hate to say this, but I can't help wondering whether Richard Allen didn't see Libby as very similar to his own daughter. And wasn't it Libby who made contact with the fake Anthony Shots profile? So wasn't the killer really targeting her, and Abby happened to be, in a sense, collateral damage? The same psychology, I can't help wondering whether that's at work in the Rex Heuermann case, the Long Island serial killer. At the time that some of these crimes were happening, he also had a daughter who was growing up.
I think a lot of folks thought it was somebody local because of the bridge itself and its location. It would not be something easily found if you didn't know the area well. Nobody just happens across it.
What if I know him? What if somebody I know did this?
Call us. You could be the person that helps us to solve this horrible crime.
And if you think about it, the person that needed to call, well, wasn't that Kathy Allen? And so did she have anything to contribute? Now she does, now that it's a fait accompli, now that her husband is behind bars. I also think there is an element to this crime that's similar to the Idaho 4 case, which is that the killer had more victims on his hands than I think he bargained for. And instead of Richard Allen being spooked by a dog barking, he may have been spooked by Libby's phone ringing, as well as not being able to find it. As far as I know, I think there's a photo in the documentary of Libby's phone found in situ. We don't know whether he was aware that he was being filmed, but if Richard Allen thought he was, this would have spooked him as well.
I'd seen Libby's Snap story, but her posting a picture of Abby on it and posting a picture of the bridge wasn't really anything out of the ordinary.
And that brings us to number 5, Kathy Allen breaks her silence.
The first time I saw the picture of Bridge Guy, it could have been anybody. It really could have been anybody.
That's actually not true. It couldn't be anybody. It could only be people who didn't have an alibi. It couldn't be someone who was somewhere else at the time. And so it really came down to a very select group of people. Also, it couldn't be a child Also, it couldn't be a grandfather. It was a person, a male of a particular age and a particular build. And so I couldn't help thinking, is this what denial looks like? In any event, we'll examine Kathy's perspective in episode 2, but I mean, her own husband has now confessed to her multiple times. And so after the fact, you're still saying, it could be anyone. So let me ask you, is this what denial looks like? Is this what denial sounds like? You know, when he arrived home that day with clothes covered in mud and blood, didn't he put them in the laundry? And did she really not notice anything?
On High Bridge, it's an old railroad bridge that's a very dangerous bridge to be walking on.
Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. By the way, if you want to catch further analysis of the rest of this documentary and you haven't subscribed, please do. You can also hit the notification bell. Later today, I'll be doing episode 20 with just 2 days remaining in the Chris Watts timeline review, so look out for that. Incidentally, some people have made this comment. No, that is not an AI voice that you hear in these episodes. She might be introducing herself quite soon, so look out for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.